as long as I am moving forward in some way and I'm continually resonating with that goal of like using creativity to better the world and hopefully grow as an individual as well, then I will take up this opportunity. There's no point just kind of like stalling out here, trying to shoot for some goal. It's better just to start doing the work now and start developing and start trying to make a difference in whatever way I can. And I realize I need that momentum in my life. I feel like when I'm in motion, I'm at my best.
Hey, Sean, how are you, man?
I am good. I'm very good.
Yes. What are you doing? Actually, I'll start off with icebreaker question number one. What the heck are
Yeah.
you doing in the Philippines? Because you told me before this recording that you are now there. You're an Australian guy. You're in the Philippines. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so you can probably tell from my like nice retro curtains. I'm actually in a relative's place in the Philippines. I'm here for probably I've been here for around like, let's say a month and a half. Up to 2 months is when I'll be here. But basically, this year I've been going through a bit of a career pivot, which has involved a couple of things. It involved quitting a job. It involved staying in Japan for 3 months with my partner who's studying a MBA there, actually. And then as part of that as well, I wanted to come to the Philippines. I'm half Filipino. And I guess the Philippines has always been a bit of a second home for me, actually, since I used to go there every 2 years when I was a kid. And it's with COVID and everything, it got kind of messy. I haven't really been here since 5 years. So it felt like a perfect opportunity not only to connect with family, but also kind of connect with one of my like latent cultures that I don't think gets as much love as I've been giving it. So that's why I'm here.
I did not know you had the Filipino roots. That's awesome. And is it
Yeah, I
on
do.
your dad's side or mom's side?
On my mum's side. So she came over to Australia, I think, in the early 90s.
Do you still speak the language?
That's the weird thing. So I came here also wanting to get better at
Reconnect
Filipino.
with your roots, right?
Yeah, because it's kind of weird because I grew up in Australia and I think my mum, she had this conundrum that she didn't know what to do, whether to speak English or speak Filipino to me. And she was surrounded by a lot of Australians because I don't think at that time, maybe early 90s, there wasn't as built up a Filipino community.
Mhm.
So she just spoke to me in English throughout my whole life. And then I went through the Australian schooling system through English there. But throughout my life, there's enough Filipino surrounding me that I'm very surprised at myself at how much I can grasp of conversations. So it's really, let's say like 70% of conversations, I can probably like grasp what's going on. But I always have to respond in English, which always feels like a bit of a cop out. So I really wanted to build like my Filipino ability a bit better here, but
Mhm.
it's been going not as amazing as I thought, but I'm still happy with any progress.
It's called is it Tagalog? Is that
Mm.
the
So
name?
so the national language is called Filipino. And Filipino was, I think, kind of made after the Philippines got like independence from America and all the colonialism and things like that. They really
Decolonized.
decolonized and got independence, yeah. But they really wanted to have a national language. So that became Filipino, which its base form is the dialect of Tagalog, but it takes some other, I guess, grammatical elements at times from other dialects or incorporates a lot of English. So it's a bit of a composite version of Tagalog, but its base form is Tagalog. I imagine probably similar to like Mandarin and Chinese in quotation marks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean Mandarin is the dialect, or yes, and then there's different regional dialects of Mandarin. I guess it's called Putonghua or normal language, literally
Mm,
normal tongue, and then
mm.
there's like regional things. So it sounds like I don't think it's exactly the same, but it's yeah, they're different offshoots. Maybe it's more analogous to when I was because I grew up in Canada. Maybe it's more like oh man, this might I might offend a lot of people, but maybe how like French Quebec or French Canadian is a little bit different from French French, and
Ye-
I don't know. I mean, it's like as a person wholly ignorant of Filipino culture, I may have offended people on all sides right now, but I don't know.
No, no, I think because the like taking Tagalog and then kind of nationalizing it, kind of similar to like how Mandarin was taken and then nationalizing it, I think is kind of a similar approach. And then there's all these other dialects within the country. So my family, they can only speak Tagalog or really Filipino, but a lot of other places in different areas of the Philippines, they might be able to speak Tagalog and their dialect. So like Visayan, things like that.
Right.
So that's the language, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
And it sounds like your parents had a very similar, or your mom had a similar dilemma to that facing a lot of parents that are sort of settling into a new culture, immigrating. Like, do I use my mother tongue with my child,
Mm,
or do I try to assimilate them more quickly at a there's trade-offs, right? So, because I went through that when our family immigrated to Canada. So I don't know. I didn't know you were actually partly Asian, so it's like this is a brand new
well,
learning
well,
for me.
that's I find that very interesting that you use the word partly Asian, because to be honest, most of my life and appearance-wise as well, I feel like I have kind of self-identified as like I'm white or something like that. But then throughout my life, and particularly now as you kind of grow into adult and you're trying to find your identity, I feel like now it's more important than ever for me to just kind of be who I am, if that makes sense. And
Yes.
part of that is being Filipino. Yeah, so I'm all about kind of, I don't know, working out my own self-identity. So I would say I am Asian now very proudly. And it's interesting, a lot of my friends around me, one of my best friends was like, Sean, I've always thought you're Asian. Why would you think any other about yourself? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I just kind of convince myself in some particular way. I think appearance also kind of does that to you. And also, I think maybe this is a bit of controversial opinion, but I think Filipinos in particular in like a lot of mainstream media don't get as much um, representation as I would kind of personally like to see. Let's take, for example, like the Spider-Man movies. You have Ned in it, who is Filipino ethnicity. There's a scene where Andrew Garfield walks into his Lola's house, Lola's grandma, in Filipino. But I guess kind of relegated to that kind of side character, kind of funny side character kind of area now. I'd like to see in future when kind of the Philippines gets our own kind of Shang-Chi in popular media or something like that. So I
Yeah.
feel like that would help a lot of Filipinos. I think especially a lot of Filipinos as well, because there's a big, obviously a lot of Filipinos go overseas. It's one of the biggest, I guess, how to put it, overseas Filipino workers make up a huge portion of the Filipino economy, which in
Mm.
that is kind of amazing in itself. But it means there's a lot of children of Filipinos who grow up in foreign countries and kind of don't really know what to do with their identity. And I
Mm.
think now they're growing up into essentially me, a half Filipino, but I think there's also full Filipinos as well that maybe can't even speak Filipino themselves, but are kind of lost. So I feel like, yeah, that'll be something that I think is very important and I'm realizing is very important as I go through life. So that's why I'm very happy to be in the Philippines at this moment.
Do you have a religious background as well? Because I know that the Philippines, just throwing a number out there, it's like 99% Catholic, right?
Yeah, no, it's hyper Catholic in the majority of the Philippines because of the Spanish colonialism. But the South is also Muslim. There's kind of a Muslim majority within the South, but yeah, overall Catholic. I used to, that's a really, really good question because, and again, I don't know if controversial or not, but when I was a kid, my mum, she's kind of a bit of a casual Catholic, if that makes sense. But I think parents, they really want to like, I'm not a very good Catholic, but you should be a good Catholic.
I
So
hear that.
I got told to like, hey, like learn your Our Fathers, learn like the Rosary and things like
Eat your
that.
vegetables and learn your prayers. Yeah.
Yeah, learn how to do like the Rosary beads and things like that. And it all became a bit, I don't know, it's something that I didn't really resonate with me. I used to go to the Philippines and see all these statues of like Jesus and like the Virgin Mary is everywhere in the Philippines on like street corners. There's just statues of the Virgin Mary. And I used to find them very like, these are kind of tacky. These are kind of like not very cool. And I was really puzzled, I guess, with the whole premise of confession in particular. I'm a big, like, how to put it, personal believer in like it's your own responsibility to be the best version of yourself and to self-improve. I don't like the idea that things can just be kind of solved by some kind of, ritual, if
Outside
that makes.
power. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I didn't find that resonating with me. And I don't know if I've mentioned or talked, but I went to like Japan. I like cried in front of some Buddha statues because like, whoa, these are so amazing. I love the idea of Buddhism. It's like, wow, so much fostering yourself and self-growth and things like that. So I guess I'd align with that more now, that kind of idea, that more like philosophy of
Mhm.
like self-improvement and mindfulness, etc. But being in the Philippines now, I realize there's something that's culturally embedded in me. I actually
Mhm.
feel something now when I see all these Virgin Marys on the street corner, which when I was a kid, I didn't. I kind of like shrugged it off. But now I'm like, wait, there's something about how it represents a culture that is a part of me that now is kind of really important. So yeah, I've kind of come full circle. Not to say that I like believe in God or I'm a Catholic or anything like that, but it's had an influence on me.
And even if you did, that's fine. I mean, I'm sort of at the point in my life where I just think there are just I've just gone through different cycles. You know, I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy for 10 plus years. I was probably the tallest altar boy in our church. I did the whole baptism, confirmation, Catholic school, the whole 9 yards. I've been in and out of different states of my relationship with spirituality, and I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore, but I still consider myself spiritual. And the more I think about myself growing up in my past, it's like that's just the part of me that I can't not acknowledge, right? It's
Exactly.
like I don't have any sort of it's not like I have some sort of allergic reaction to that stuff or anything. It's just part of who I am. I've gone through phases in my life. I've had different views and perspectives. Part of growing up, right? It's just like you take on different viewpoints. I had my flirtation with introductory Buddhism. I read a few like introductory texts in that world, and I find some of the concepts quite fascinating. And it's totally fine. Like the reason I feel like I can talk about this stuff with you is because you always struck me, even through your content or your work, as someone who is looking at things from different perspectives. And I don't feel like Sean Brown is someone who pigeonholes themselves as I am X. You know what I mean? Like I am a magic player. I am a magic content creator. I am a musician. I am a designer now, right? So
Mm.
there's a lot to life, and I think it's easy to just sort of generalize ourselves almost, if
I
you know what I mean.
agree. 100%. I feel like as you go through life, you just kind of pull the things that really resonate with you. I'm big into like when I find something that resonates with me, I really want to kind of pull that into who I am. And those moments where you find something that resonates with you, I don't know, like I really like Godzilla as an example. Like I see like I remember I watched the second Godzilla movie, the recent American ones, and I like cried when he like got charged up and roared, right? I like broke down into tears while I was watching it. And people were like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you, man? But you find those moments in your life, and I think it's really important to kind of find them, bring them into yourself, and I don't know, it kind of makes up who you are, and it's this really diverse basket, and it's okay that it's this really diverse basket. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into like one particular thing. So I
Mhm.
100% agree.
And just so that we this can still be a Humans of Magic episode, I wanna. This is, by the way, this is the podcast of tangents. So it's like when we go into like a million tangents, that's when I know we're in the sweet spot.
We're
But I
vibing.
do want to know
Mm,
what is you're still playing Magic? Like, cause okay, just to set it up a little bit, I guess I can record an intro as well.
mm.
But I first we first intersected because we both love the legacy format in Magic. You were writing quite an excellent weekly series called This Week in Legacy, basically recapping the legacy metagame. You were a very nice guy, very welcoming, and we intersected, I guess, because of our travels and playing Magic in different countries. So that's kind of like the 30-second intro of what you did in the past. But I want to know, like, what is your current relationship with Magic?
That's like magic. When I think about magic, all I think about is how I owe so much of my life to magic and how my perspective on life. the connections that I've made. It all kind of stems from there, I feel. And I think in particular, James, like how to put it, when I was writing for mtggoldfish.com, who's also shout outs to the column still going, Joe Dyer killing it, love it. It's amazing that the name of This Week in Legacy is still going, and that kind of philosophy of the column is still there. I love it. But I think when I was writing that, you also in parallel were like building Humans of Magic as well. And I think initially as well, it was strongly linked with the legacy format since I know you were, especially your book as well, largely about the legacy format. And of course, it's a great format. But probably similar to yourself, from that kind of kernel of how it was just a game and cards that you were playing, it developed into all these crazy intersecting, interlocking connections with people, whether it's across the internet, whether it's in communities that you're locally in. And I guess that's where magic still exists for me. It's that feeling of community and the feeling of, you know, I love the game. I love the cards. I have a lot of nostalgia for the cards. But to me, it's about, yeah, hitting that feeling of connecting with friends, connecting with community, getting some nostalgia out of it. And I guess also, it sounds kind of strange, but magic is like, I go there for the feeling of nostalgia, which I think nostalgia is just like, just reliving being a kid is what I think it is. And then also trying to be an adult and trying to feel important, which is winning. So that's why like the spike, the spike quality will still like come through for me whenever I play Magic.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of it fits into my life at the moment. Within the Melbourne scene, I really am enjoying at the moment. I still play a little bit of Legacy. I still always have my painter deck sleeved up, but I couldn't bring it overseas because I'm just too worried about like losing
Yeah.
for City of
It's
Traders.
risky. It's
Like
a lot of money, a lot of value.
it's like I'm okay with when I went to Japan to bring it because I don't feel like I'm gonna get robbed, but still it's in my luggage and stuff like that. It's still, I don't know, like they've become very sticky now. Like I can't really take them anywhere with the price of legacy cards now. But anyway, I still have Painter and I try to keep up to date, my deck list up to date, still play occasionally. And then in Melbourne, we really enjoy the Australian Highlander format. Do you know about the Australian Highlander format, James?
Is it just like Commander, but it's I mean, Highlander is there can only be one, right? So you can only
Hmm.
use one of every card, which is similar to Commander. But other than that, I don't really know. I've heard of Australian and Canadian Highlander and different variants.
Yeah, so I think, and you'd probably know better than me about Canadian Highlander, but I think Canadian Highlander is like 100 cards and they
Yeah,
have a points list, while Australian Highlander is 60 cards and it has a points list that is managed by the Australian Highlander like community. But what I love about Australian Highlander, which I think, to be honest, in Legacy is lacking for me at the moment, just due to a lot of power creep of cards and a lot of like Nimble Mongoose. I can't really play it anymore because it's just power crept out. For example,
you should tell
um,
that to my MTG opponent the other month. Like, I think I probably lost not because they had Mongoose, but because they had 3 days on the play. But I digress. Yeah,
but anyway, but because of the singleton rule, you got to dig deep into the card pool. So often you end up, yeah, you play your Murktide, you play your Oko and things like that. But then you dig deeper and you're ending up at like your Nimble Mongoose kind of thing. And I remember the first deck I built for it, which was only like a couple of years ago, was this like Bug, Lurus, Nimble Mongoose, Traverse the Ulven Wall kind of mishmash kind of thing. It was like modern Death Shadow mashed with Lurus and mashed with like Canadian Threshold, like Dark
yeah.
Threshold. I was like, man,
Mhm.
this hits the spot.
This is it, huh? Yeah.
So I've been enjoying that. A couple of my friends are getting into pre-modern as well. So playing Madness in
How do
that
they
because
curate the ban or the points list? Is it similar to that of a legacy format?
yeah, I don't know, we can share the link or something at some stage, but basically there's a committee in Australia that kind of I can't remember whether it's every quarter or so. They kind of look at the metagame and the shape of the metagame and then like put associated points with particular cards. So for example, cards like Ancestral Recall, as an example, you can only have 7 points in your deck, but a card like A Call might be like, let's say, 4 or 5 points. So it takes up a huge portion of your points. while something else, like let's say Ragavan, as an example, might be like 1 to 2 points. So you
Mhm.
kind of got to structure your deck around that. So it means you can't just like fill your deck with all the super powerful cards. You
Mhm.
really have to make kind of strategic decisions on how you want to angle your deck. So I find that pretty cool.
Do people play things like 0 point Australian Highlander, or is it always like try to get 7?
I mean, it's always try to
Like the
get.
popper of Australian Highlander.
Well, if it was like, you mean like some people don't put the points in their deck at all?
Yes.
I think there's enough. You can kind of find enough points, I think. There's even cheap cards, like cheap, powerful cards, which are pointed. Let's take Sol Ring as an example, right? It's a cheap card, but it's still very powerful. And so you can still put it in your deck.
Mm.
So I think overall, not so much. There has been a recent, how to put it, if you don't have any reserve list cards in your deck to encourage people into the play, you get an extra 8th point, which is a very interesting kind of dynamic
Yeah.
because the dual lands, the reserve list dual lands are so important in these singleton formats. Because otherwise you just have to rely, all you have to fetch out are shock lands and you just rely on all the wonky lands after that, or basics. But you'd be surprised how without the jewels, your mana base actually really, 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 really struggles. So it's almost like impossible to play 3 colors. So it's a kind of
Mm.
interesting restriction that's been introduced. But overall, yeah, I find the format pretty fun. There's a pretty competitive community in Melbourne and across Australia, which is great. And yeah, you get to play all the old cards and hit all the nostalgia feels and things like that. So for me, it's pretty enjoyable.
That sounds pretty cool. I
Mm,
need to try that potentially sometime because I think 60 card formats are just better, personally speaking, for me. I just feel like there's tighter deck building. I
that's
guess
it.
with the exception of Yorion, but I mean, there's tighter deck building, and it just feels more. I like Magic when it's more deterministic. That's also the spike side of me
Yeah,
coming out. Like
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just not the biggest fan of Commander because it's more like a board game. Rather, it's a different thing with a similar engine than the same game. So, but
Yeah.
to each
No,
their
no,
own, right?
no, to each their own, but I'm very aligned with that, James. I feel like as weird as it is, Magic's gotten to a point in life where it's like, I don't know, I can't call myself a casual because even if I'm playing casually with friends, I take it very seriously.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
will always, and I think it's that kind of philosophy that Magic's always put on me is that
Yes.
your best opponent is yourself. So every game you're trying to make the best plays, plan out things as best as possible, because it's like feeds into your own self improvement in some way, is what I've convinced myself.
Yes.
So I can't take any game casually when it comes to Magic, but I think most games actually, it's either I kind of take it competitively or I just like don't play it at all,
Yeah.
is like
No,
my
I
approach.
I totally get you. It's about trying to do the best you can under most circumstances, if not all circumstances, right? Because it's not like we're playing for high stakes. I mean,
Mm,
I'm still bemoaning the loss of legacy GPs or GPs in general. But when
mm.
I'm going to play in some sort of modern PTQ or RCQ or whatever it is called these days, I played a couple last year. I'm still trying my best. Like, I may not have a lot of experience or reps in that format. I may have just borrowed a deck from the very nice guy at the store, but I'm still wanting to win, right? It still bothers
Mm.
me if I lose more than I win. It's just something that, like, I just can't ever get that out of me. I just
Yeah.
can't, and I don't want to. So
You
it's
know what? You know how like sometimes it doesn't bother me when I lose. It bothers me when I
how you
kind
play,
of
maybe.
don't play well. Like when I don't, when
Yes,
I like lose to myself or like I
100%.
haven't made the optimal plays.
Yeah.
I feel like that's when I get most
It's more
upset
about
with
that
that.
for me too, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like, but I think it's just so tough because you can always see some minor or sometimes not minor misplay because like
Mm,
it's very easy to ruminate or reflect on what you've done. I think Magic is really a metaphor for life. Maybe this is a little bit of similarity that we share, even though we've never talked about it until now. It's just
mm,
it's Magic is learning about yourself. Magic is about self improvement, and so that's the good and ugly part of the game, right? It's like you can always
yeah.
find something to beat yourself up for, at least in my experience.
No, I 100% agree. Like I feel like Magic teaches you to get that balance when it's like, this is my responsibility. I needed to do better. But then there's other times where you can say, listen, I did my best and I couldn't do anything about it. Like they just had the nuts, they just had whatever. Like I feel like there's a huge analogy in life where there's lots of situations that you go through in life where you have to make that same judgment call where you think, did I do my best? Or is it just, man, I got a bad beat and there's no reason to beat myself up or to complain or get angry or things like that. It's okay that things just went bad for me and I just got to take it and move forward. So
Yes.
I feel like that's a huge analogy. And I feel like that's one of the things that Magic has taught me that I just take through my entire life all the time. So yeah.
And sometimes, as I have learned, when I play a tier 3 deck and I lose, then I have to blame myself because that's a big part of the game. Is
Yeah.
deck selection. I've stopped playing Nick Fit in Legacy. Shots fired to Nick Fit aficionados. So, but I want to ask you, like, what? So you're doing Magic in your native country, or I guess one of your native countries, which is Australia, because your deck's still there, isn't expensive. Are you still at all following Magic even when you're not there? You not in Australia?
Yeah. No, I'm always like talking about Magic with people that I play Magic with. Like I feel like I'm not as like when I used to write as an example, or when I was just very into Legacy, I felt like my finger was on the pulse all the time. I knew like
Yeah.
the latest random sideboard card that people were using in
Right.
Japan. I felt like I was like very on top of those things. But now maybe not so much. Now I'm kind of more just, I don't know, a bit more normal about it and just taking it as it comes. But I do really like, for example, I played Modern with one of my friends online recently, played a Modern bug shadow list that has like the Battle for Ikoria card in it. Man, I
Oh
sound
yeah,
like
yeah,
such
that's cool.
sound like such a boomer, but I like literally played the card and I was like, so what's this do now? How many counters am I meant to put on it? What? Oh, hex match. Oh.
Oh,
Makes a
so
thing.
yeah, that's the thing where you the what's it called? What is the
It,
card type even called? I'm so out of
it's a
touch.
siege. It's pretty good. It's like very
Yeah,
good.
and you just put one hex mage in your deck because you can always tutor for hex mage and then make
Yeah,
a
so you
8/8
tutor for
or
hex
something.
stage and then you make an 8/8. And then I like killed my opponent just with the 8/8. And I was like, this is quite cool.
Mm,
So yeah, it's like I don't know how to put it, like a zenith for any color. So yeah,
yeah,
it's good.
yeah,
All I can
yeah.
say it's good. But yeah, that's the kind of level that I'm at. I'm still like engaging with the game. I think it's always going to be like a through line through my life, like until I die. I have a joke with Stephen Tang, one of our mutual friends, that in Australia there's a lot of, I guess, Asian communities, like Vietnamese communities, Chinese communities, and they're always playing like Chinese chess or like playing cards in front of restaurants, like in front of like Vietnamese restaurants. I'm not sure. Maybe you've seen similar things in China
Oh
actually.
sure, yeah, yeah.
Japanese. But my joke with Stephen Tang is that when we're old, we're just going to be like playing Magic. Like 50-year-olds in front of the noodle shop, just like playing Magic. And oops, there's my underground sea, just kind of like flew off into the distance. Oh well, I'm 60 years old. But
I think by then we'll have to all use proxies or have the cards like in steel cages because
yeah,
underground seas probably be like I don't know how many grand by then.
they'll
So
be in museums by then.
you know
Yeah.
that actually kind of reminds me of when I was still living in Beijing a few years ago, and I was just playing Magic with my like we're just practicing. I think it was like I want to say 2015, 2014, even back then. And we were just playing Magic with real legacy decks, just non-proxy at a McDonald's. And we just suddenly looked at each other, and I think we all had that moment as legacy players. Like we are playing with this much value of cardboard in
Yeah.
some nondescript place. Not that you feel like you're gonna get robbed, but it just feels so. It's just it. I don't know. It's like there's just kind of it's kind of like you look at yourself like an out of body experience where you just realize like where you are and
Yeah.
how ridiculous the situation is.
Yeah. When it's like, wow, this card can slip from my deck onto the floor. I could walk out of this Macca's and that's someone's car right there. Like this
Yeah,
this black bordered underground sea, that's someone's car, like a small car.
right.
So yeah, it is that
Yes.
I've had very similar experiences to that as well with friends.
That's a lot of Big Macs in this one card. Like
Yeah.
this might be the entire set of orders for this
Yeah.
restaurant today.
Yeah. They
Any
can
anyway.
close up.
Anywho, so what exactly are you doing now? Like you said, you're exploring a new career. So tell me about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, no, that's it's a pretty long-winded story. I'll take it all the way from the start
No
if you
problem.
like,
As I
Jay.
said, I like the tangents, so bring it on.
Yeah, this is going to be the longest tangent. So, it all starts when I was a young child. So when I was a kid, I really basically I've been an only child my whole life, and I think when you're an only child, you really have to find ways to keep yourself occupied, find ways to really, I don't know, find your own companionship. So other than just like playing Game Boy, I spent a lot of time like writing and drawing with two of my main hobbies when I was a kid. So I would draw a lot of weird dinosaur looking things, and I would write a lot of stories that I'd never finished. Um, so that's kind of the story of my childhood. But I guess once you go into the education system, it starts to get layered with a lot of other different things. And I realize, I don't know if it's the brag or not, but I think a lot of kids end up like this. I was relatively good academically. I was pretty good at most things, I would say. And when you go through life and you get to the end of, say, high school, I remember, so in the Australian schooling system, um, I remember I had to drop a subject at the final year of high school. And the selection of these elective subjects that I could drop were out of three: economics, chemistry, and visual communication and design. And I remember at the time, I don't know how old was I, like 16 or something like that. I was sitting with my parents, and they were just really not, I can't say they were like not on board with design, but I remember at that time, at that moment in time, I don't think creative fields were really admired as a career path that people could go down. And I think especially my dad, he's a pretty traditional Australian guy, and my mum comes from a bit of an Asian culture. So yeah, they came from a pretty traditional culture, and as a result, they were like, Sean, we don't, we know you enjoy it, but we don't think this is the right career path for you to do design. What do you like? I think the kind of feeling in their mind was like, what are you going to do? Make posters for the rest of your life or something like that? So then I ended up doing economics and chemistry. I went to university and studied a Bachelor of Commerce and then also mastered chemical engineering. So I did masters in chemical engineering.
Wow. Okay.
And then, so I really, I feel like I think when you're young and you come out of high school, you don't really know what kind of your identity is. You don't really know what you're passionate about. You just kind of go with the flow, I think. And I think throughout those years, I went with the flow. And I just kind of went through the university system here in Australia, popped out, got a job at a multinational kind of engineering related company, Honeywell, which is a pretty big global
Yeah,
company.
very, I mean, obviously a global powerhouse. Yeah.
Global powerhouse, right? And so I worked there for a while in sales, kind of working on large infrastructure projects within Australia, which was pretty interesting. Like, to be honest, it was like a lot of good exposure to, I guess, I don't know, it sounds kind of dumb, but like how the world works. That makes sense. You see all these large projects and things like that kind of come together. You kind of learn how to talk to people. You learn all those kind of basic
Sure.
corporate skills, I might say. But I remember going through these kind of huge projects, and they were pretty time tight. There was huge deadlines. I remember working quite a few weekends, and just struggling a bit. I think it was the nature of the job, but also I think it's because I couldn't feel it resonating with me. And again,
Mhm.
it goes back to that feeling of resonance that I was mentioning before. And I remember it was like 3 a.m. I was in front of a like Excel spreadsheet, and I just kind of broke down a bit and was like, how did I get here?
What
What
am
am
I
I
doing
doing?
here? Yeah.
Yeah. Like what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And I think in those moments, that's when you kind of look back on your life. And then I was like, what would that kid who was drawing dinosaurs and like writing random stories, would he admire this person at the moment? Would he be like, that was the person that I wanted to be. And I realized that wasn't the case. So I think that really triggered it. And I think, I don't know, it might have been the next day, I just enrolled for a university course. I didn't really know what design entailed at that moment in time. So just going back to like what I knew from high school, I was like, oh, graphic design, I guess that's design. So I enrolled in a diploma of graphic design and started doing that part-time while I worked. I changed jobs to a place that had a bit more flexible hours so I can continue this part-time study. And then I've been doing that. I still haven't even finished that diploma, actually, James, but it's been like 2.5 years since I've been doing it part-time the whole time. But yeah, so recently I quit kind of completely out of that industry. And then we come full circle kind of to the near present where I was like, now's the time. I've quit, I quit that whole industry, infrastructure projects and things like that. It's now really time to be, I'm going to be, a product designer. Because after going through all of, the diploma and things like that, I realized the most important thing to me is in my life is I want to utilize my creativity to make the world better. I think it's really that simple. My creativity, my problem solving to make the world better. And as long as I'm doing that, I feel like I can get through in life. I'll be very satisfied with what I'm doing in life. But yeah, anyway, I was like, I've quit my job. I'm going to Japan for 3 months. I'm going to spend some time there with my partner and some friends. And also I'm going to knuckle down. I'm going to get this portfolio done. I'm going to come out. I'm going to be a freaking like product designer. I'm going to kill it. But I think I realized that when you kind of, I don't, you want to set goals and it's good to set like a high bar for goals. But I think it's important to realize that sometimes you can set them really high and you won't achieve them. But at least you got, I don't know, 60, 70% of the way there. And you're kind of moving towards that goal that you're looking for. So yeah, I was like in Japan after 3 months, just like staring at a Figma file, which said like portfolio on the top of it, like a blank frame, and just like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then I went to a meetup in Tokyo, actually, and it was for this place called Creative Tokyo. And I went there, and the talk was about content design. And of course, content design, I guess, has evolved kind of into this particular job description over maybe the last, let's say, 5, 7 years or so. But most people might know it very similar, kind of coming out of the UX field into UX writing, into then content design, because I guess you're not just writing microcopy, you're thinking a lot more about the overall design and research. And it something else that had resonated with me for my whole life came back again. It was all this writing that I've done. It was all this expressing myself with like, yeah, magic. Like magic had been such a pivotal platform for me to be able to develop as a writer and to communicate something and hopefully make people feel something and understand something and really guide them and help them. And I think that's when, bang, everything just kind of came together. And at the moment, a friend of mine, a designer friend of mine, actually, a job just came up on LinkedIn about working in content for an Australian health tech company. I was in Japan. I took the interview from a convenience store, but I realized that as long as I am kind of moving forward in some way and I'm kind of continually resonating with that goal of like using creativity to better myself, to better the world and hopefully grow as an individual as well, then I will take up this opportunity. There's no point just kind of like stalling out here, trying to shoot for some goal. It's better just to start doing the work now and start developing and start trying to make a difference in whatever way I can. And I realize I need that momentum in my life. There's no like just staring at blank Figma files and trying to make something out of it is not going to drive me to kind of get to the point where I want to be. I feel like when I'm in motion, I'm at my best. So that's why I'm working here in the Philippines as well. Like it was meant to be a bit of a holiday is what I originally planned, a good 2 months hanging out with family. but I'm really enjoying actually having momentum behind me working and then also enjoying time with family. That was very long. I'm
That's
sorry, James.
no, that's great. That's beautiful. I think there's a saying, right? The progress is the point. Like this is something that I've really internalized, especially in the second half of my life. It's just when you're younger, you try to set goals and arbitrary or not, and you're just working your way through there because the society or the world allows you to do that fairly easily. Like, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to graduate from school with this degree. I'm going to graduate, or I'm going to make X amount of dollars. I'm going to have a house. There are these tangible goals that society has just put in front of us. That's very easy to just articulate in those terms.
Mm,
But what you realize later on is that if you don't want to be destroyed or devastated with every setback, you have to fully lean into the fact that the progress is the point, that the journey is actually more important. So I think it's actually beautiful that you didn't get that initial degree that you were doing on the side, because that's not the point. The point is to just be in that moment, because
mm,
like the alternative is to sleepwalk through life and just get all these diplomas and do nothing with it, and be incapable of critical thinking or thinking about what you actually want. Because I think that's great. I think it's great that you had this kind of wake up call, and I think it's unfortunate that oftentimes it takes, maybe this word is too strong, but it takes like trauma or some sort of like really negative event
no, no,
for us
no.
to actually figure it out. Like you have to work like consecutive crazy overtimes, and like, you know, you have to be in a certain condition, and it's unfortunate, but I'm glad like you found it, right? So
I like,
I know you said a
yeah,
lot, but I was totally listening to that and totally relating to it in that way.
yeah, no, like I agree. And like, to be like, you look at it and you're like, oh, I regret that my parents told me this when I was a kid. Oh, I could blame
No,
them
it's
so
not
much.
even about
I
regret.
regret
It's
all
just
this. But it's, yeah, you,
you chose a road, and you can always go back and take another road, right? Or another
or
fork.
the road just changes. Like the road just kind of
Yeah.
forks off. And I think like nothing's, I, I think there's very few people, and I might be generalizing here, who have this very clear cut, clean journey through their life. And as you said, maybe you might see that, but maybe they themselves are questioning, is this the right path for me? I feel like maybe me and yourself, perhaps, I really believe like you shouldn't like not turn over the rocks throughout your
Mm-hmm.
life. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
it's a waste of a life if you're not turning over every single rock to discover what you could be as a person. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the realization that I had. And so that's kind of why I'm very happy to keep going through this kind of winding journey. And I'm very happy with, I guess, the skills that I've built up. And I feel like that kid back who was like writing and drawing stuff, he could look at me now, he could look at me in 20 years and he'd be like, I'm so glad I'm that person. I want to be that person. And I think that to me is, yeah, really important. So yeah, I don't know. I hope our listeners kind of, yeah, maybe think about that. Because
Hopefully
I
they're
know
vibing, or they've totally turned this off by now, which is totally fine too.
yeah,
You know,
they
like they're
probably
like, who are
thought,
these
man,
two crazy people?
who are these two crazy people? I thought this was meant to be about magic. What's this about?
Well,
Roads
I
and
sucker them in
journeys.
every time with this Humans of Magic front door, which is really a scam. But yeah, I think you also come full circle on these things. Like even taking this podcast as an example,
Mm,
I don't remember if I told you, but I had this existential crisis with Humans of Magic where it's like this hero. I was like, am I going to keep doing this? Because
mm,
I don't know how many more people in Magic I can talk to, which is kind of why I love talking to you now, because it's like. Um, I don't exactly know where the show wants to go.
mm,
And I think if I'm honest with myself, I do think I've gotten better as a podcaster, interviewer. I know how to do this thing a little bit better. But I think it's kind of similar to a career, even though I'm doing this part time. It's like you can do things well or even at a high level and even be good at it, but that might not be your calling. Like I thought about this recently because I have a full-time job and it's actually going really well. I've gone back into corporate after doing startups for the past couple years, and some days are rough, but some days are like, hey, I'm pretty happy to be here. And I'm sort of blabbing now, but
No, go
I
for it.
also have this. I also have this podcast, but I'm also kind of thinking like, do I keep doing it? Like, kind of like what you have with writing, where initially, I actually find that I enjoy writing more than I love podcasting.
Mm,
So I've also been thinking like, should I get back into writing because I've been sort of like doing the podcasting and now YouTube because I thought this is a way. Uh, a, I'm good at it. B, I enjoy it, right? And C, I think that these platforms allow me to scale to more people as opposed to writing a blog. But I'm also been thinking recently, like, what about just doing stuff for myself, right?
mm,
Like, it's not just about this sort of like commoditization of content and like, obviously if I do this interview with you, I would love that, 5,000 people listen to as opposed to five, right? It's just the
mm.
selfish part of me that's like, if we're doing it, might as well. But I think there's also something to be said for like, just because something's going well or just because I'm good at it doesn't mean that I should keep doing it. So I'm also having this sort of um, I don't want to say crisis, but it's like just a fork in the road that I'm thinking about. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I
Yeah.
think like, I don't know, just a thought. Like, I guess the balance is always like, how much are your listeners, like, are your listeners getting a lot of value out of it? Are they really enjoying it? Like, what's the feedback? But then also,
Mhm.
you got to balance that with like, there's no point burning yourself out for the
Yeah.
sake of someone else's like enjoyment or pleasure and things like that. It's great if you can have both, where you're like, there's a perfect balance and you're doing something you enjoy and people are getting a huge amount of benefit of it out of it. Like I feel like that's the
Yeah.
perfect balance. But if anything of that is out of balance, then I guess it's time to reassess and think about it. So,
Oh, for sure. And maybe this is something you can relate to as someone who's done content before. It's like I really love the process of doing it. Like when
mm,
I'm doing this with you right now, this is the best part of Humans of Magic is the live recording experience and not knowing what I'm gonna say and not knowing what you're gonna say, like and doing it live, that's the best, right? And also the getting the feedback from people, which is unfortunate that is mostly positive, has been awesome.
mm,
But what I don't love, and it's almost not even, it's almost like a position of privilege complaint. It's like when I get too obsessed over the numbers or like how many
yeah,
people are
yeah,
listening to
yeah.
it or it's the whole like machine behind it
This
that
goes
that's
back
like
to like when we were talking about being a Magic player, right? It's very
yeah,
hard to like not take it seriously. Anything that you do, it's either you give 0% or 100%.
yes,
And so maybe you're feeling that. It's like, can I keep giving my 100% to
right.
this? And I don't know, maybe it's the same dilemma of like Magic. I don't know. It's very hard to be
I
like
feel it is. I feel
with
it's like
a,
a variation, right? Because you're not
yeah,
supposed to be results oriented when you do magic when you do content, but you
mm,
can't help it because it is some sort of barometer, right? Let's say that I love playing magic and I'm spiky. Like if I am plateauing at like a 20% win rate, that still bothers me, right? Even if I felt like in that time span I played my best or whatever, like I don't know.
yeah. No, yeah, it's very similar parallel. And I don't know. It's very hard to just be like, I'm gonna, this is gonna make it lots of commander players angry, but it's like, I'm just gonna quit and be a commander player and just like do it kind of very casually. I feel like maybe you and me, it's very hard to do those kind of things. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I totally understand the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how are you enjoying getting back to you? Like how are you enjoying the this current gig and like being a content
Mm,
designer and all of
I
that? Like
think
what's the good, bad and ugly? Because there's not going to be a perfect role or job out there.
no, no, no. Like I'm not even like formally a content designer, to be honest. I'm just like a content writer, strategy kind of. I guess you realize when you start working, firstly, titles don't matter that much. Just do work and do it good and do your best
Hmm.
and learn as much as you can. And that's all that matters, is what I think. And try and, of course, move forward with a particular career trajectory and like have a plan for that and give feedback and be like, hey, I want to be moving towards this. But overall, I am enjoying. So the company that I work for, they are a health tech company within Melbourne. They basically provide an education and learning management system platform for nurses in Australia to be able to track all of their learning and also basically have a portfolio of all their learning so that they can prove that they have achieved particular hours that they need to achieve every year. But
Right.
what, and this is probably the first time that I've had a job where I'm like, I can really tangibly see that I'm making a difference in the world and for some kind of, I guess, like social good, where I'm working for a technology company that creates a technology that is helping people become better healthcare providers, which helps so many people in Australia live, essentially. Like that's pretty amazing. Um, so I feel like that to me is very, very gratifying. I feel like any future roles, like I really enjoyed that feeling, knowing that I work for a company with that kind of approach. And I feel like I'll take that moving forward into the world. I think as well, this is my first time really working within a tech company. So I feel like I have a lot of close friends who work in tech. So I feel like I've kind of osmosised a lot of information from them. I've also studied a lot of UX design, of course. So there's a lot of that I'm aware of, but actually being deep in the weeds and working with all the different people and collaborating with a lot of different people, I'm finding it really gratifying to learn how to do that and also find where I sit within that kind of ecosystem of a technology company. And I feel like I personally have a lot to offer. I mean, we've talked a lot about writing, we've talked about like designing. I don't think I'm as good as a designer in quotation marks, let's say like as a visual designer, as an example. I don't think I'm pretty half-baked visual designer. I'm not going to lie to myself, and I feel like it's something that I want to continually improve at. But I was listening to a podcast, and they were saying, sometimes when, let's say, like you live with your partner in a house, and you're a team, and each of you are good at different chores, and some days, they're gonna like, I'm pretty bad at cooking. My partner will do the cooking, and she's great at cooking, and I really appreciate that. And sometimes the designer, they'll help you with a great visual design, and I'll like write the words for it. I'm like, damn, that's excellent. But sometimes that designer's not going to be there. Sometimes your partner's not going to be there. Sometimes you're going to just order takeaway and get the job done for the night.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my skills are there to be able to get shit done, I guess. Ooh, don't know if I can swear. But
Oh, you can say anything you want. You could, yeah, swearing is absolutely fine. It's not a kid's show.
okay. Because like I guess like that's as I said, my kind of mentality when I go into workplaces. I'm there to get shit done with the skills that I have available to me. And yeah, just do my best. And so I think, yeah, particularly like I think my superpower I've realized is words, and I have like a pretty strong ability when it comes to visual design that but could also still improve a fair bit compared to like let's say other benchmarks within the industry. But that's okay.
Mhm.
I just come as the person that I am with the skills that I have and do my best to make an impact. And I'm very happy to do that. So
I think you're a valuable asset to um, whichever employer you choose to hitch your wagon to, because uh, just a bit about me, like I've worked in tech my whole career, and
yeah,
in
I wanna
product
hear
roles.
your story, James. Like
I've
take
been
the
I've been in pro.
reins.
No, I mean just the little part of it I wanted to share because it should be mostly about you. Product management, right? So I've
Mm,
been basically building software products, usually with an engineering team, with a business team stakeholder, and with UX designers. So I think having working with designers, whether visual or content or UX or otherwise, who have a very strong self drive, I think, or taking the initiative, I think that's really important. I think to be someone who is a quote unquote self starter in a situation in a team, I think that's super valuable, and I think that might actually be something that you're taking in from your past background too,
I
because
agree.
when you're in sales or when you're in that previous world, you pick up a lot of things, and I think the best talent are the people that have multidisciplinary or they're able to stitch together the best parts of their past to make something great. You know what I mean?
I agree. Again, like you're just pulling things from your past and using what works. And yeah, there was a moment like recently where it's like an echo of an old manager like came back to me and was like, what would I do in that previous situation? I would just do this. I would just like get it. I would
Yeah.
approach it this way, or I would try and get it done by this particular point in time. I would plan it out this way. So it's, yeah, I agree. Like it's all kind of a conglomeration of that career pathway, and nothing, you don't discard anything. I think that's the thing that
Yeah,
I want to get across. Even if you're doing like a career
totally,
change, you don't discard
totally.
anything. It's all a part of you. It's all valuable. Like I guess there's a lot of people like listening who are Magic players, as an example. And damn, I've gone to so many interviews and I have talked about Magic. It is ridiculous how many interviews I have talked about Magic the Gathering. It is that's what I mean. Like I owe a lot to it. Not only talking about how I used to write, but how like I think a lot of people are probably involved in like their community of Magic, like organizing tournaments, like just working with people, things like that.
Sure, a
Like,
lot of social skills and intangibles that
mm,
come from being involved in Magic, right?
I think I might have mentioned before or something like that, or we had in the show notes or something, that like even building a Magic deck and like ideating a Magic deck, honing it down to the 60 cards, and then testing it, and then refining it further is just the whole like design double diamond process. And I was like, wow, you just learned that by fiddling away on Moxfield. So I hope a lot of listeners, I don't want to sound like patronizing or something like that, but I hope a lot of listeners realize like Magic gives you so much in terms of things that you can take forward in life, whether it's just life wise, career wise, and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. That's yeah, something as well.
At the very least, if it wasn't for Magic, we wouldn't be here recording, and we wouldn't be like I wouldn't be talking to you, who is Filipino Australian guy who's over there, and it just brings people together at the very least,
Mm,
right? So
that's right. Yeah. And particularly like I guess like it's been very good over the past like 10 years of how networked the community is across the internet. But let's take, for example, the legacy community as well, James. Like maybe I'm not super involved in legacy as much. I don't know how, have you been playing much legacy?
I have been playing a little bit. So,
Mm,
if you know our mutual friend Julian Knob, right?
yeah.
Who has who's very deep into Legacy, or has been at different times of his life,
Mm,
but deeper than most all the time.
yeah.
And
Yeah, that's
uh,
a good way to put it. Deeper than most all the time.
I just threw that out there. But there was a time last year where I really didn't play much because of the lockdown I mentioned in
Mm,
China. There were no paper events, and I was feeling like I was spending too much time like doing like no stakes Magic Online grinding, and I kind of stepped away from that.
mm,
And also last year, it wasn't, from what I heard, I didn't actually play it that much at the time, but I heard it wasn't a very fun period. Although I
yeah.
would dare say I talked to Julian about it. Actually, we recorded an episode of Humans Magic together, and
Mm,
in the live recording, I kind of worked out that it's not Magic, it's me. Like I was
mm,
disillusioned with Magic, and there were all these things that I was using to make excuses, like the format doesn't feel fun, or like this card should be banned, and all that kind of stuff. But really, like I had to make peace with myself that it was really me. It was not the game, because Magic is just a way for me to channel something about myself. So, I mean, honestly, last year I started playing a little bit of Modern. I started playing a little bit of Pioneer because I wanted to mix it up. And I felt
mm,
like if I didn't enjoy a format at a certain time, I can always do other formats. I did not want to be
yeah.
the person that played a format relentlessly and also didn't seem to like it. And
Mm,
it's like, then what am I doing here, right? So
yeah.
I kind of did. I had that phase last year, so I was stepped away from Legacy for a little while, and then the short answer is like I got back into Legacy this year. I started playing paper events. I started playing a little bit of Magic Online again, and I sort of figure out the right balance of not
Mm,
being too deep into it, so it's still somewhat enjoyable, not getting so deep as to feel like I reached that really bad pinnacle of like entitlement that I always get when I
mm.
start feeling like I deserve to win because I had somehow I have like good superior knowledge of the format,
Yeah,
or
you're
I
like,
played this
I
matchup
know it
like
all.
100
Yeah, 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 yeah,
times,
yeah.
like being a know-it-all instead of a learn-it-all, and it's just like that's just not a good place, right? And I think part of getting older is also knowing when who you are, and just recognizing you got to set up these routines so that you don't become like a suboptimal version of yourself or regress, you know what I mean?
I wanna hear about these routines. What do you mean by routines, James?
I just mean like don't put yourself in a situation. I
Mm,
don't mean something crazy like, like what's that book, like Atomic Habits, James Clear,
mm,
where he talks about like, you need to like put the mouse like here on the
yeah.
table so that you're never able to reach it. It's not something crazy like that,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like just don't get to a place where you just recognizing that you might not be in a good spot. Like if I'm playing too much
Mm,
Magic or reading too much about Legacy, just know when to shut it down, like when to go for a walk, when
mm.
to do a podcast instead, or when to do anything else instead. Like just don't just try to find the kind of balance and moderation in your own life that
Yeah.
you're not too obsessive over one thing. That's what I meant.
Yeah, no, no, no. Like, I was curious. I agree. I actually kind of put into place mechanisms when I get there in my life. I think probably the biggest mechanism that I have for that, that I've really started to go deeper on, is journaling. So, in particular, I used to journal all the time, but sometimes you just scatter some thoughts on the page and be like, haha, I've done with my journaling kind of thing. It
Oh,
just
dude,
became,
I've been journaling for I want to say at least 6 or 7 years. Like I still have
yeah,
my previous journals
yeah, yeah, yeah.
dated, and I can go back and read like what was I thinking about that time? Like why was I so smart? Why was I so stupid? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I like at my house back in Australia, there was just like all these like crumpled up old journals just like stacked up. Like, what do I do with these now? But I started to really like formalize this like journaling approach so that when you get so deep and bogged in something, I always think about what energized you today, what drained you today, what did you
Yeah.
learn about yourself today, and what are the 10 things you can be grateful about today? And then it kind of unplugs you from whatever you're obsessing about, whether you're like angry about something, whether you're like very deep in whether it's magic or other games or whatever it may be. I feel like
Mhm.
just taking that time to reflect is like super important as you start to
Yeah.
get through life. So I don't know. That's my
I've
mechanism.
got it.
That's when you said routine. I was like, ooh,
No, no,
what's
I totally love that. I've been doing that. I just want to say though that how I've been saying like my life is kind of like cycles. I go in and out of things.
mm,
I've after like religiously journaling for a while, this year I actually started to journal way less. I went from
mm,
writing like a page a day, 2 pages a day, to writing like a page a week.
yeah.
And the reason for that is because I think it's because of like some stuff I was going through at work recently, and I just got so busy that I initially it was like got so busy that I didn't have time to write about things, and I just wanted to. And that sounds like a crazy, like a stupid cop out excuse, right? Like I'm so busy I can't
No,
write
no, no,
or
no, no,
reflect.
no.
But no, that's that. I just mean that in a that was like my level one reaction. But
Yeah,
then
okay.
what I kind of realized when I thought about it more is that there is a kind of, let's put it this way, you should always try to do things at a like not 10,000 hours, but you should always try to do things fundamentally before you figure out if you want to keep doing them or
Mm,
draw an early conclusion. Because there's people that'll just be like, I don't think you should do this, or I don't think I should do this, and they haven't actually tried it. And I think that's actually not right. I actually objectively think you need to try things for a while to know if you're gonna like it. I'm not saying you have to try every kind of like illegal substance out there, but like if journaling, you should try it right before you knock it. Or if you never use an Android phone, like pick up an Android phone instead of an iPhone and try it, right? So like there's value in trying it, but then after you try it, then you can figure out, should I deviate from the script, right? So this year what I realized is that as I got my 10,000 hours of journaling in, sometimes I had a tendency to overthink on my reflection process as opposed to
mm,
actually taking action,
mm,
because like I would be like ruminating on something that happened last week, but really if I want to make progress, especially in my role, because like my job is kind of like waking me up to it, it's like I don't need to write about all these things because I just need to live it. I need to figure out what's my next step. What do I need to do literally now? It's more about
mm.
like, what do I do now, but not rather than question, why did this happen? Oh, why do I feel this way? How did I feel this way? It's more about, if I have to choose, I don't have limited time, finite time. I'd rather just focus on what the heck do I need? What do I do now?
Yeah.
Right. So I sort of distilled it down to that, but that comes about through trial and error. Obviously, your mileage may vary, someone else's mileage may vary. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. So
No, but I think like as you said, like you try things and then you can kind of sculpt it to how you want it to fit into your life. And I think when you talked about magic and legacy like last year, as an example, like you tried it, you felt a particular way about it, but you found alternatives to be able to keep magic still within your life because that's something that's important to you. And yeah, like I feel like that's really important. Try it and then make it your own, I think is something that I like to live by. So yeah, anyway.
yeah, and I also wanted to ask, like, because you were quite a prolific, or am a prolific musician, right? So you
Mm,
had been also performing music. You were in a band or are in a band.
yeah, yeah,
What's the
yeah.
deal with that? Like, how did that get started? How did you initially even start playing instruments and all that jazz?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I remember in high school, I first picked up a bass guitar. So the bass guitar was my first instrument. But I remember, like, firstly, I have never been like classically trained in music or anything like that. I was one of these like kids at 15, like kind of punk style, picked up a bass and was like, I'm gonna learn music through this. And I started trying to learn some songs, like I don't know, some Ramon songs or whatever to start with. But I realized, man, I don't really like learning songs. I immediately started just making songs with the rudimentary skills that I had to like make some random three chord song and kind of build it up
Mm.
from there. So I think that kind of, it was looking back on it, it's really kind of how I've approached a lot of my life. Like I really value,
Well, I mean, it's just a vessel for being creative. If I may
yeah, yeah,
interject,
yeah, yeah.
like it's
No,
like
no,
you
yeah, that's
just
right.
like most people, they're just like learning the songs, but you're like going right into like, how do I make it my own, right?
That's right, exactly. So I found it immediately that that's what I wanted to do. So then throughout university, I wrote a lot of songs with one of my close friends. And we were just hanging out. We just like go to his house and hang out on the couch. And like we found it so amazing how quickly we could write songs. But it's because we really had a beginner's mindset when it came to music. We didn't worry about perfection. We just worried about, oh, let's like try this chord progression. And I was like, all right, I'm going to write some lyrics like right now in the next 5 minutes. And we'd write it down and we'd try it. And over time, naturally, the song would kind of morph. It would just iterate kind of naturally. It's like, oh, that word didn't sound that good. Let's change it to this word. Um, so that happened naturally over time. We'd been in university for a while. And then after that, one of our really close friends who played Magic with me, I used to play a long time ago, Modern with him. And then we drafted for a while and he got a little bit into Legacy. But just, you know, how you have a circle of friends and some of them you just randomly, it just happens that you met them through Magic. But really, it's kind of no longer important that you met them through Magic. They're just one of these
Yeah.
close friends. He was just quietly, in his own time, a piano prodigy and a music producer, like able to produce music really well. And the three of us linked up and we started making songs. And it kind of just happened from there. So we released an EP, I think, on Spotify a year or so ago. Unfortunately, I'm on this kind of trip overseas. Music producer slash lead guitarist, he's off in New York, pursuing his dreams. So he's yeah, like a very senior software engineer. So he's out in New York, kind of pursuing his dreams to, you know, work,
Mhm.
maybe find a way to start his own business and things like that. So it leaves one of the other thirds of the Trinity still in Australia and still loving music. So I think again, music's going to be something that's always there for me. I love it being there as like a creative outlet. I love just picking up throughout my life. Everything kind of becomes a creative outlet in some way. But at the moment, the band Voicemail is on hiatus. So sorry, listeners, if you're keen to see some new songs. But yeah, they're on Spotify if you want to go have a look at us. It's Voice with a space in the middle, Mail, and you can see two and a half Asian guys on
Yeah.
the photo. That'll be us.
Well, hiatus means that there's always a chance in the future, right? When things get better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, like myself, I mean, since I've been overseas at the moment, I don't have my gear with me. But even personally, I always have been making a lot of music myself. And I think it's about time for it to just like stop being in the lab and start cooking it and just start like getting it out there. So there's a backlog of songs that I've got to like put on Bandcamp. So I don't know. I'll let you
Right
know when
on.
those are out. They're kind of like
Right
a bit of
on.
a cool, weird, shoegazy kind of
the
vibe.
Sean Brown, I don't know, bootleg. No, it's not bootleg because it's from you directly, but the sessions, the
Yeah,
sessions.
something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, nah, love music. Love my jazz master that I like, kind of custom built myself, and love my
Are
bass.
there are there are there is there like new music out there that you're particularly into right now, or?
That's yeah, no. To, weird, good question. Being in the Philippines
I've
again.
never asked this question ever on an episode of Humans and Magic, but I love it.
That's
So
okay. All right. No, being in the Philippines, I've been like, man, what's Filipino music like? Is one thing that's really been like I've been questioning. And man, there's a lot of cool stuff in the Philippines. I also went to Thailand recently as well, on one of a trip as well. There's lots of very interesting music within Southeast Asia that I think is like bubbling up now.
mhm.
Interestingly, in the Philippines, I didn't know this was a thing, but there's a big amount of shoegazers in the Philippines, which is a
Right
genre that I
on,
really
right
like.
on. Yeah,
But I have no idea why, but maybe it's because like shoegazy sounds very hot and humid. That's just a weird
could be,
guess. That's
could
just
be.
a weird guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of those kind of bands that I've been listening to, and there's a lot of cool, like, yeah, indie pop kind of sounds coming from this region as well. So I'm really into what's their name? Wongoids is like a pretty cool band that's out
I've heard of
there.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's I don't know, there's just that's kind of what I've been delving into. I think it goes again back into like delving into my identity and things like that, and just finding places where like I wonder what that's like. I've never really investigated that. So yeah, that's where I'm at with music
No,
at the
that
moment.
that that's great because I'm a lot older than you, and I still remember a time when we had to go to the radio for music. Of course, that makes me older than anybody who's ever listened to this podcast. But I just feel like what I'm trying to say is that I just feel like music is so nicely distributed now because of Spotify and
Hmm.
SoundCloud and these platforms. Like it's so global. Like there's good and bad of that, but like for example, I sometimes I'm just listening to like K-pop that I don't even understand. I'm just listening to it, right? Or I'm watching some sort of anime because someone told me about it, and I can go on a Crunchyroll and
Just watch
watch
it.
it.
Hmm.
And the flip
Hmm.
side of the whole global music thing is also that music it's become borderless, but as a result, but it's also become sort of more homogeneous.
Yeah,
Like
it's also
there's
become
this
like
kind of
we take music for granted so much now. Like I remember like
yes, it's
buying
like
CDs.
yeah, it's like now it's just a tap that you turn on and
That's
music
it.
comes out,
I
you
think
know?
of Spotify
There used to
literally
be
as
like
a
I had
utility.
to go to Virgin Records and like go to a listening booth, like listen to this new record or LP, and that's just no longer the case.
Yeah, I think it really does vary on culture though. Like for example, in Japan, they're still very into like physical CDs and go to Tower Records and
Yeah,
get that kind
yeah.
of experience. And it's still kind of blooming in a particular way. But I think
Mhm.
that's maybe due to the culture. They enjoy kind of how to put it,
Yeah, they have
obsessing about
arcades
things
still.
in a
They like
particular way.
tactile. They like
Yeah,
real things, which is nice. Yeah.
which is nice. But then of course maybe it can nice at times, but can shunt off progress at times, is what I might say. While
Yes.
maybe in the West we're very pro progress, and that can lead to things being very quickly commoditized, or as you said, it's like turning on a tap.
Mhm.
But at the same time, for let's say, for example, my band, you could very easily find a way to get yourself on Spotify and then quickly, very easily find a way to get yourself on TikTok and very
Yeah.
quickly find a way to become a huge success. So I don't know. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, to be honest. I also kind of glorify in my mind that experience of like, wow, well, remember when albums were a thing and you really like listened to an album the whole way through? Wasn't
Mhm.
that a glorious era? But a lot of people that's kind of lost on now because yeah, you just kind of pick a playlist and off you go. But I don't know.
How do you
It's go
How
ahead.
do you feel about the mystique factor though? Like, because I remember a time when this new music came out and I didn't exactly know what it was. Like, I had to go I had to watch MTV until the music video came on, so I would know
Mm,
what the band looked like, right? But now it's in Spotify. It's like, okay, you see them. Okay, I can go to their profile, I can go to their Instagram, and go to their YouTube, right? I can just find out. I can watch all their videos, and you could find all their interviews. Like, so there's a kind of like, how do you feel the mystique part? Like, is there a discovery process? Almost like Magic too used to have that, with deck lists and things like that, or sets, right? How do you feel about just the mystique aspect of music? Is that important, or
I
is it
th
just
I think
or is it just me?
no. I think if you want to keep that mystique as personally, like if you want to go and buy that physical LP and hold off, like you can still make that decision to do that yourself
That's true.
personally to keep the mystique if that's valuable to you. Um, and I think people are within this age of just information is you get information immediately everywhere. People are changing the way that you create this mystique with various types of content and things like
That's
that.
true. It's
So I think
shifting.
it's just shifted. I don't know, but then I remember I was seeing something about why are songs like let's say around 5 minutes as an example, but it was due to the size of the record, the single. A
Yeah.
single would be a particular size, and therefore that restricted songs to be a particular um, length. And then I guess sometimes for me, I feel the worry of like, whoa, is TikTok, as an example, continually going because that's such an important gap of time for people's promotion of music? Is that just going to shrink songs length and we just
Hmm.
all we're trying to hear is almost like a jingle version of songs, if that makes sense?
Yep.
We're just trying to grab hooks
It does.
rather than grab a comprehensive journey, which I
Hmm.
think to me I find very valuable. So I feel like that's kind of changing. I feel like, yeah, I see like a lot of younger relatives and how they engage with music changing, where it is becoming more of this, yeah, kind of jingles and like commoditized version. So I don't know. I feel like if you really do enjoy music though, I feel like there is still avenues for you to enjoy it whichever way you want to though. If you put
Absolutely.
your mind to it. And I think that to be honest, I feel like that's the case with any way you consume content. So let's take, for example, um, YouTube, right? You can just be fed whatever you want continuously on YouTube. You can just click through videos and just be fed whatever and just be like at the mercy of the algorithm. Or, I mean, I'm ridiculous and I just make a million personal playlists and like categorize all the videos that I want to watch. And then my algorithm kind of cleans itself up and I look at it and like, wow, it's presenting me exactly what I want. But you can curate the experience that you want
Yes.
out of whatever you're trying to consume. But
Mm.
that's up to you. Like, if you're not doing that, well, that's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of on you
Hmm.
if you're just consuming it in this kind of
Totally.
like haphazard way. So I don't know. That's just my kind of philosophy.
I like that because honestly, for me, content is a big part of my life. I mean,
Mm,
not just creating it, but consuming it, right? Like I'll just watch YouTube or Netflix when I'm eating or something like that.
yeah.
And I think I think curating your content is really like curating your life. It
Yeah.
really is because it's such a big part of your life's diet, right? So you
Yeah.
have to be intentional with that stuff.
Yeah.
I think it goes into the whole like not to make this the central theme of the podcast, but this kind of like accountability responsibility thing where it's
Mm,
like rather than feeling like you're always pulled in directions by forces outside of your control, you can take control into your life and create a kind of like a framework for
exactly.
how to live it properly. And
Yeah.
it's not by being like a woe is me, you know, the algorithm,
Mm.
hashtag algorithm, but it's more about like trying to figure out how you can be more intentional with everything.
I think that's, yeah. And I think like even you mentioned like how to live it properly. I kind of caveat that by saying like living it how you want to live it rather than properly. Maybe properly to
Yeah, there's
you.
no proper, right? Yeah,
There's no
someone
proper,
else's, not yours.
but
Yeah.
there's no proper, but it's like if you have an idea or like you have some form of understanding of how you want to live your life, there is a way to go in that direction. And even the smallest way of like what you consume on YouTube, there is a way to go forward with that. So yeah, no, like as an example, this is an example of like something randomly tangent. I really wanted to like learn a lot about design. What do? I very consciously consume content about design and like curate it. I want to learn this particular skill. This goes in this particular playlist. And I'm like watching that. And it kind of
Hmm.
then builds its own kind of cascade. But it starts with that intentionality. So yeah.
That's great. You can learn everything on YouTube these days. I learned how to do thumbnails. I learned how to do podcasting stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, no.
It's and yeah, as long as you
Yeah.
stay out of the whole meta of like YouTube watch YouTube content on how to YouTube. Don't do it too much. It would just screw up your mind. Like you're just like in this kind of inception scenario. You don't want to get in there. I've been there, and
I've
it's
been
not fun.
receiving like ads, like marketing ads on how to do marketing a lot recently,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
man, this is
It's
too
like
deep
how
for
to
this
get rich.
stuff.
Step one. How do you get rich? Step one. Write a book on how to get rich. That's how you do it. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also want to ask you about the because I think for a while, I don't know if you still are you still doing like your daily design?
Yeah. So
Okay.
on my let's jump into that kind of conversation. So on my Instagram I like post up bits and blobs of like what I do, random sketches, random things that I come up with, whether it's like actual projects I'm doing or just like random stuff that comes to mind. But also every day, I think from a very not a very long time ago, it feels like a long time ago, maybe from like a year ago. I have been using Midjourney since I guess around its inception, and just playing with that for a very, very long time. And then I decided, what if I just posted one image every single day so that I'm like learning how to use this skill and exhibit how, because it's kind of amazing how you can just get an idea and shoot it into the world. And it may not be perfect, it may feel like a bit like AI, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. But seeing how the technology grows and grows and grows, and I think it's been like 200 and something days or so that I've done at the moment, is very, very interesting. And I hope people who view it find it very, very interesting that it's like, oh, so that's what I can do now. Oh, crap. Now that's what I can do now. And it just kind of keeps going. Um, so yes, that's my daily AI series that I've been doing for quite a bit of time.
What are your thoughts about ChatGPT or Midjourney or like these things that are capable of doing so much? And I think we're just scratching the surface of what it can do. Do you have any thoughts as to what this means for people in our professions? I guess we can call ourselves knowledge workers, whether it's
Mm.
designers or product managers or writers. Is it all doom and gloom like people seem to say it is, or do you have a different perspective on it?
I have a very, I imagine both of us have some very nuanced perspectives on it. I'm curious to ask yourself, for example, James, like how do you utilize AI tools, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's just like for humans of magic, as an example, how are those things integrating into your life at the moment is what I'm curious
Mm,
about. And let's kind of like build the conversation from there.
yeah. So I don't use it that much for work. I would say engineers that I'm working with kind of dabble with
Oh,
ChatGPT to write their code or like to do little experiments. And I talk to them once in a while about their experiences because I'm very passionate about learning from other people's experiences. And I really want to know like what are they seeing and so I enjoy like things on that level, first of all. Just seeing people in tech just use the technology and kind of dabble with it and just because really I see it, this whole thing is like it's almost like remixing in music. It's like you're
mm,
taking something, you're making it different. There isn't this kind of clear delineation of like where the human starts and where the machine ends or the machine starts. So I think it's marvelous. For my own personal projects like this one, like Humans of Magic, I actually don't use it that much. Like I kind of dabble with using AI or technologies to generate thumbnails for YouTube. I've dabbled with like, writing copy this way. But if I'm being honest, I've sort of intentionally chose to stay in the cave after trying some
mm,
of these things
interesting.
because I I feel like there's a little bit of my individuality that's kind of lost when I do it. So I
Mm,
think it's for me it's almost like a reference. It's like, okay, if I want to do a thumbnail, let me try to do it myself and then let me see what um, the machine created one looks like.
the
And then let's
machine
just figure out,
benchmark. Yeah.
yeah, benchmark and then kind of like still kind of end up doing my own
Mm,
or same with writing copy. I've tried doing like some writing, like ask GPT to write something and it's fine, but it's ultimately not my voice and I know it. So there's still that kind of did painters get obsoleted when they invented the camera? They probably said that now that we have a camera, you can click and you can capture anything in the world. Like, why do we need painters? Why do we need these things? And I still think we'll always need human expression and creativity and individuality. And so there's never going to be a risk of us going away. We might be de-emphasized.
Mm.
Like I might not be able to make as good a living as I am in the future if I was a writer or something like that. But just because something isn't commercially profitable or viable also doesn't mean that it's invalid.
With these tools, you still, at this stage, but probably into the foreseeable future, human intention and human creativity is still going to be one of the most important things. And I feel like as well, when, and as you said, James, you probably said, go write something, and it wrote something that's very generic, and you don't feel anything from it. And one of my, like someone who I follow on LinkedIn as an example, they started like this article series, and it was like, and I was like, man, this guy's churning out content. This is amazing. Wow, what's this content? And then I read it, and it's like your sixth sense goes off, where you're like, this is just ChatGPT blobs that have been pasted in. And I feel like that, I don't know how to put it, that uncanny valley of content is going to be very easy for me and you to recognize. And that's where, how to put it, human creativity will be important, but also human creativity, not alone, but boosted with the capabilities of AI, will also be very, very important. And I think the ability for AI to make you more creative is very powerful. Like for me, feel that with a career pivot, I don't have, 5 years of design school behind me like a lot of other designers. But I feel like with these new tools, I've been able to bridge the gap somewhat. And there's still going to be that uncanny valley. There's still going to be where it's like, I'm kind of faking it till I'm making it. But that's better than just not having anything at all, being able to like not create anything at all. Otherwise, it'd just be like zero. I wouldn't have a reference point. You'd just be shooting in the dark for your thumbnail, as an example. So I feel like things like that, they really, I guess, unlock so many people to be able to be creative that weren't able to be in the past. They wouldn't see it as a possibility. And as someone who kind of in the past threw away the possibility of being creative and now came back to it, I am so excited for all the people that'll be like, wow, I can just do this now. I can just like make some cool images. Wow, I'm creative now. But in the past, they might be like, my destiny is to be, I don't know, an engineer or a scientist or something like that. Then who would have thought about it? So I feel like that's really great. The ability for AI to build people's creativity and be like a launching pad for them. But I feel like we'll still need the human to still express some form of intention, whether it be some creative outcome, whether it be some business outcome, like any outcome, it still needs a human to set that goal. And I think that's always going to be important. And when it's not important, then I don't know, maybe that's like Terminator time. But I don't think we're going to be, I would say that's always going to be important, human intention, because that's what these machines are made for, right? To help our human intentions and goals. So that's kind of my first point. Did you want to add anything to that, James?
The one thing I'll add, which is great, by the way, this first point, I think you're also calling out something, or at least I'm feeling that it also requires us to be more proficient than ever at every discipline, because like, how do you and I recognize bad writing? Because we're actually decent writers. So it's like, you can only recognize bad writing if you're not a bad writer. And there's still always going to be that sort of cream rises to the top, where maybe it is a future where every writer has assisted writing, but you still have to be like the top 1% will still get to the top 1%. You're always going to need some expertise. It's just that expertise is sort of shifted. Because the other point you made, which is great, which is like, you're catching up as a designer. Well, it levels the playing field. And maybe that's actually a good thing, because, I've been a designer for 5 years. I deserve a better skill level than you. But no, right? Because maybe there's certain things that are just like brute force problems or like grunt problems that the AI could just help you get past or level the playing field on. And that's actually pretty good, right?
Yeah, no. Like that's to be honest though, I think like you mentioned like yeah, a designer, whether it's someone doing coding and things like that. But I think that remember James when we used to put like in your resume, I could do Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. That used to be
Yep.
like in your resume. I think now it's going to be like I don't know, like almost. I remember people saying, "Oh, there's going to be a new job. It's a prompt engineer and things like that." But I think what actually is that just merges with a lot of people's workflows, and I think we see that with the suite of tools coming up from both Microsoft, Google, and things like that. They're going to be so integrated in all of our work that you can't avoid them. You'll end up using
Mhm.
them to speed up your productivity, and it's just going to be there, like how Microsoft Word's there as an
Yep.
example, and those tools. So I feel, yeah, as you said, it levels the playing field um, for everyone and makes everyone more productive. And you mentioned writing, and I know a lot of people are like, "Wow, being a writer must be crap. You're going to be out of the job soon. You're just gonna stuff's like gonna be spat out of ChatGPT, and you're like game over." But I definitely do not think that is the case because I don't know, like writing is like very much not much writing and a lot of editing and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a
I
lot
feel
of
that.
like I don't know how to put it, like getting the content right so it has the right message and is really hitting, I guess, the heart of the reader is what I like to think about.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a machine can assist you with that to give you ideas on how to do that. And honestly, this is how I would use ChatGPT a lot of the time
Hmm.
is to build almost like a huge wide spectrum of ideas that I can pull from, like a palette,
Right.
that I may have had some latent in my brain, or I may not have. And that's kind of presenting this new idea to me that I can like bring in. And
Hmm.
I think that's, I don't know, that's to me is kind of like how writing will evolve. It will
Yeah.
become way more higher quality and more dedicated to the reader, which is just a net positive for everyone. It just means that very rudimentary writing tasks, anyone who's just doing like very, I guess, like kind of mundane kind of copy,
Hmm. Hmm.
that may get removed. But those people can now be elevated to work on things which are a lot more human centered, which I think is just a net plus overall.
Yeah. I feel like also just on the writing thing, there are some parallels between writing and creating music. When you are a writer, you have a more appreciation of who your audience is. And I think audiences for writing are not just like people that are looking to get information, but there's also people that look to read for pleasure. Like
Yes.
there's
Well,
pleasure in reading something that's structured a certain way, reading something by like a Hemingway or like a famous author or a poet, the same way that why is there so much music out there? But why do I love it? Because there's pleasure in like consuming something that I know comes from some sort of human or some sort of
mm,
creative force, right? This is why I think also, I don't think music that's wholly generated by AI, maybe AI assisted, but wholly generated by I would never get into that because there's a layer of artifice that if I just know anything about it, whether it's writing or music, it's the uncanny valley. Like I just don't want
mm.
to be there. If I'm in there for the purpose of pleasure, I can't connect with that.
I
You
think
know?
like when it comes to, yeah, let's take things like music, art as an example. I feel like if those things, like something AI generate, let's take, for example, I made a drum loop with an AI tool, but then I took that drum loop and then I put my wonky shoegaze guitars on it, or I did some
Yeah.
kind of things. Then it starts to be something that has helped me, but it still creates that human connection. And I think the main thing why does it have a human connection? Is because you can see that someone enjoyed making this and
Yeah.
enjoy sending that message out to you. And I think the same comes from like, let's take art as an example. Whether it's if it's AI generated and it's just wholly AI generated and shot out there, then maybe it doesn't really resonate with people because you can't see the labor that has gone into it, the labor of love that has gone into it. And I think that's what we as humans resonate the most with when it comes
Hmm.
to like art or music or things like that.
Hmm.
I think when it comes to very functional things like design, as an example, the line gets a bit blurred, especially design is something which is kind of a bit of art, but also a bit of like pure function. So there kind of maybe is moments where it's just like, I just need to get this diagram that I AI generated. I'm just going to present this because this is fulfilling the goal of what my business needs right now. And I guess that's why I delineate between design and art. in that respect. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's that human. I don't know. I think there's always going to be people making music and people painting stuff and people, I don't know, people knitting and sewing and
Mm.
just doing anything that you want because we as humans take pleasure in that. Just that pure, like rudimentary, we're crapper than like, we might be crapper than like robots at it.
Mm.
Let's say laborious tasks, like crafting something as an example, like making a chair as an example.
Mm.
Why do people still hand make chairs? Because there's a pleasure in creating that handmade chair, even though maybe a factory could have made it better.
And you'll maybe pay a premium for the knowledge that someone made that chair.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's always going to exist in human society. I don't think you can exterminate that because it's something almost like essential to us as humans to want to connect with another human
Yeah.
through whatever they create.
But
So,
as we're talking about it,
mm,
I'm also fearful that eventually I think these things will get so good that they could imprint like artificial genuine things into the thing so that it's rough around the edges so that the song feels like it was curated by a human whereas it isn't, and that kind of thing. That's when it gets really crazy, is when they solve the uncanny valley problem.
I think though, like even if the uncanny valley is solved and you saw as a tag, like maybe there's some clause where it says, by the way, this was generated by AI, you will just not listen to it anyway. Like I think it's just, even if it sounds the same, you won't
Mm,
listen to it because you know that someone hasn't put that labor of love into it. Or
mm,
maybe, like, I guess as humans, we're really obsessed, not obs maybe I'm obsessed, but with stories and with understanding like how something came to be. And
yeah.
that's what gravitates it to us. So to be honest, if someone made an AI generated song or AI generated piece of art, but there was a story behind it of how they worked to build, to bring all that together or to curate it in some way. And I
Right.
do believe like a lot of people, rather than just creating things, like putting pen to paper and doing stuff, rather than just creating things, a lot of people are going to become really good curators of
Yes.
AI generated things. But there's still, to me at least, there's still enough human touch there that I can resonate with it. But maybe for
Right.
some other people, it might not be the case. It's like
Yeah.
that's out of it for me. But that's okay. It'll exist in its own category and it will be there for the people who want it to be there. And for all the other things, those will still exist as well, like just
Mm,
pure painting and things like that.
mm.
So I know that's my kind of yeah stance.
I've gotta stop interrupting you. I gotta let you move on to your second point.
No, no, no,
I think.
no. I really enjoy these. I like this kind of riffing off each other. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, though, like this sounds all great and glorious and things like that, but I think there's a lot of issues and challenges around legislation that is just, I don't know, the can of worms is open at the moment. Like, I think because I kind of started within the image generation space and kind of looking at that, that has been the Wild West for even up till now, where it just pulls everything from like as much as the data set has from the internet and converts it into images. And I guess the problem with this is, firstly, the copyright of these images. Like, where is it taking these images from? Um, like the mechanism behind how it's stitched together, is that actually like a copyright breach? That's to me a very important conversation to have. And secondly, there's a huge amount of inherent bias. If you take everything from the internet, you're just going to get a ton of porn to start with, right? And
Statistically speaking.
imagine if a model is just fully biased on porn. Like
Hmm.
it's going to just create very messed up images that are then going to be sent out into the world in mass and almost
Hmm.
like pollute the minds of everyone. And to me, that is something that is going to be very, very important moving forward. And I think I don't know, there's interesting work being done. I guess let's take, for example, Adobe. They recently announced their like generative AI in Photoshop as an example, where you just like, whoa, change the background all of a sudden. And their data set is fully based on like Adobe stock, which is like submitted to Adobe. So it's kind of pulling from a data set, which is very, I guess, it feels in some ways like safe, I guess, when it comes to copyright and bias. Maybe not bias, actually. Because I guess if you look on Adobe stock, all the doctors will be like male, white-haired, old men kind of
Sure.
thing.
There's still some bias in who curates those. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously there's problems with that. And of course, all the other things, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and things like that. Those are still, of course, the Wild West. And let's take, for example, Midjourney. That's a very curated model. So it's been curated to be very, very aesthetic, which is, I guess, it produces very high quality generations that, let's say, Adobe, based on all their stock images, probably won't be able to get to within the next half a year. Maybe in the next year, they'll be able to get there. But I don't think the Adobe tool is yet at a super practical level compared to, say, Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, which is fully customizable, and just a very open source tool where you can just feed whatever data set you want into it and just go nuts. So it's kind of like this weird black hole where, yeah, you could make whatever you want with that. But I don't know. And this is weird, James. I'm like saying the word porn too much on the podcast, but in the same way you can,
Not at all. It's fine.
in the same way you can generate porn with Stable Diffusion, as an example. If you want to like generate naked girls, you can do it. People can draw naked, have been able to draw naked girls and pornography throughout all of history, like since we've been able to pick up a pen. So I guess the controversy comes, is Stable Diffusion just like a pen, a tool, a tool in some ways? And it's not, it's up to the responsibility of the person holding the tool to do something correctly, rather than like legislate around it. So I don't know, that to me is something that really comes to mind and I think is very, very important. I think for myself, as someone who uses generative image technology, like to me, I will always try to like use it in an ethical way. I think the other thing that comes to mind as well is, I guess, of course, if you're talking to ChatGPT, you're feeding it a lot of information. And I think organizations themselves, to get widespread organizational use, I think it can be, yeah, a bit of a challenge and a bit of a concern for many organizations. So I think there probably will be solutions within this space coming soon. I know Microsoft, and you might again know more about this than me, but I know Microsoft, like for example, they can pull information. Their data set is just like all on your SharePoint, as an example. Like it just takes all your internal information and then can like very rapidly pull it, which would be very useful for organizations. So yeah, there is a lot of things that are concerning, not just from like, I'm going to lose my job, which in my mind is, yes, people will lose their jobs, but I think overall will be elevated. But I think there's all these other more ethical
There's a
issues.
societal issue. It's more than
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the jobs. Yeah.
It's more than the jobs. And of course, that extrapolates all the way to like, oh my God, Skynet kind of like level of concern. So yeah. Oh, one of the other things as well that I wanted to mention that is a concern of mine when it comes to AI is, I know you mentioned we have we can sense the uncanny valley. My dad, he is pretty old. He likes watching YouTube. But I get very worried about the content he consumes because a lot of the older generations, they don't have that sixth sense. They weren't brought up with technology. They
Right.
could be fed anything AI generated, like fake news and things like that. I know, of course, we've seen in the past with just fake news. Older generations in particular can be like catch onto that very quickly.
Fake
Um,
news and now deep fakes. Like there's all
Deep
kinds of stuff.
fakes, yeah, yeah, exactly. So that to me is very, very concerning because there's a huge population of
Mm.
people on planet Earth that is just kind of, I don't know, they're not going to have that sixth sense. They're not going to have that uncanny valley that we have. They're just going to think, oh, that's how it is. And there needs to be a way to be able to like identify those things,
Mm.
to make sure that those people are kind of, I guess, in some ways kept safe. So,
I think that's when I think about that too, with respect to, for example, my parents, and also just thinking, just even projecting into the future, like 20 years from now, I'll be that person
mm,
from the last generation who doesn't know this new stuff,
that's
and I
right.
will be fooled. And like, there's no point in thinking that we're all special and like, we're different from everybody else. No, we're not. I mean, we are, but in a lot of ways, we're not, right? And I think it also requires like a kind of, we need to have empathy for different generations of people, older and younger than ourselves. It's not productive to be like, yeah, that's not a problem because
Mm,
I can deal with it. or to be overly cynical about, oh, you know, this new generation, they're growing up on these tools, like there's going to be no more creativity, you know, hashtag old person yelling at clouds again. There's none of that stuff is really that productive. I think we just need to have some, I'm trying to be optimistic about this. We need to have empathy about for each other, like everybody else, and just recognize that everybody absorbs the technology different, right? Whether
Mm,
if you're neurodivergent, if you're of a certain culture, certain background, like it's not just yourself, but it's also the other people around you that are going to be affected. And if you can't see past yourself, it's just very hard.
yeah. I think we got them all out, James. Like the thoughts on AI and things like that.
I feel like this podcast is like wonderfully splintered into this like AI podcast. Like this is the great thing about this podcast. This is why I love it, is that I feel like every kind of like how you talked about your career, like, you know, going into engineering or going to a painter, becoming a designer. I feel like every episode of this show has become now like, is there a sliding doors moment where like it fractures into another podcast or something else, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and but yeah, Sean, I just want to say I really enjoyed this conversation. It was it was wonderful talking to you, and I don't really know how to properly end this, just but other than to say like this could probably go on for another 3 hours.
Yeah,
But
really good.
I just really enjoy catching up with you and just talking about this stuff, and I hope you somewhat enjoyed it as well.
No, of course. No, always happy to talk, James, and anyone else who wants to reach out. Yeah. So no, very, very like to be honest, James, it's just very, very good to catch up. Yeah, more than anything.
Yes, Sean, what is the best place for people to connect with you or to find you where you would like to be found on the internet?
Yeah, I think probably two places. Kind of my more creative place on Instagram. You can find it at Sean Brown underscore creates. So that's SEAN Brown like the color underscore creates. Or you can find me on LinkedIn is another if you're interested in the career talk and things like that. That's Sean Brown 156 is the LinkedIn name on the hyperlink. But yeah, that's probably the best places to reach out to me.
Excellent. Please do reach out to Sean. He's a wonderful person, and thank you again, Sean, for taking the time.
No, thanks very much, James. Very, very like really enjoyed it. Thanks.